Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. President Trump says Netflix's $72 billion bid for Warner Bros. Discovery could be a problem due to market power. The proposed merger still requires regulatory approval to move forward. Dark comedy One Battle After Another, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, tops the Golden Globe nominations with 9 nods ahead of Sentimental Value with 8. Acting nominees include DiCaprio, Dwayne Johnson and Jessie Buckley. The Supreme Court agrees to hear whether President Trump can fire an FTC commissioner at will, a move that could boost executive power. The ruling may redefine independent agency limits. Lawmakers push a must-pass defense policy bill that surpasses Trump's own spending request amid rising security pressures. The package reflects growing focus on military readiness and modernization. The White House is preparing a $12 billion package for farmers hit by trade war losses, targeting major crops like soybeans and corn. Officials say it aims to shore up rural economies ahead of 2026. Defense tech firms have doubled their share of Pentagon contracts, but now struggle to scale from startups into mass production. Analysts warn supply, labor, and cost pressures are slowing their surge. The Supreme Court will review Trump's move to limit birthright citizenship, challenging a foundational 19th century principle. A ruling could redefine who qualifies for citizenship by birth. The KFF poll finds 1 in 4 Obamacare enrollees would drop coverage if pandemic-era subsidies end and the premiums double. Health experts warn millions could lose insurance in 2026. US President Donald Trump says he's disappointed with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for not reading the latest US-backed proposal to end Russia's war. Trump's remarks add to growing pressure on Kyiv as Zelensky meets top European leaders amid concerns that Washington is pushing a peace plan viewed as too favourable to Moscow. Russia has not endorsed any proposal and maintains its hardline demands, while Zelensky says negotiators remain divided over territorial concessions and security guarantees. Trump's team recently flew to Moscow with a revised plan and later met Ukrainian officials in Miami, but the effort has not produced a breakthrough as of now. Meanwhile, in London, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. The leaders have made statements on the US peace proposal and the path towards ending the war. Let's listen in to them.
Things which are very important for today, I think unity between Europe and Ukraine, and also unity between Europe, Ukraine and the United States. There are some things which we can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
For peace, but we will talk this afternoon about the plan in some detail, but the principles remain the principles that we've operated on for a very, very long time, which is that we stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire. And that's why it's so important that we repeatedly set out the principle that matters about Ukraine for Ukraine.
And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands. The financing and the furniture of equipment and training programs to Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, and the fact that the Russian economy is starting to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions and the US sanctions, And now I think the main issue is a convergence between our common positions, Europeans and Ukrainians, and the US to finalize these peace negotiations.
I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from US side, but we have to talk about that. That's why we are here. Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you all.
We're now joined by Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. to discuss this. Thank you very much for joining us, Raymond. Donald Trump says he's disappointed with Ukrainian Volodymyr Zelensky for not reading the latest US-backed proposal to end Russia's war. Your thoughts on how these negotiations have panned out? If all readings are correct, we currently think that we are in the final 10 meters of this, as US envoy to Ukraine Keith Kellogg said just a couple of days ago. Your thoughts on how things have moved in the past 24 hours?
Well, thanks for having me, Thomas. It seems to me that the present situation shows the limits of the Trump transactional approach to international affairs. Rather than having a strategy, partners, principles upon which he is and his administration are negotiating, it's to get a deal in which President Trump comes out on top. What is happening, of course, is that Trump is sending negotiators, Witkoff, his Kushner, his son-in-law, and they've been talking basically about economic deals which are very familiar and compatible with their backgrounds in real estate and transaction. Unfortunately, this throws Ukraine really under the bus to say that Zelensky hasn't even read the proposal, of course, cannot be the case. And Zelensky, of course, is trying desperately to bring Europe to his partners and to have the strategy to preserve the independence of Ukraine. As presently written, the independence of Ukraine would be very fragile because of a lack of real security guarantees and the giving up of territory which Russia hasn't even conquered. So we may be close simply because of withdrawal of support from Ukraine, but this is not the way to a lasting peace. Neville Chamberlain went to Munich in 1938 and came home with peace in our time. That is not the approach which should be taken by the United States as a former leader in world democracy.
Do you find it strange, Raymond, of this division of this united Western Front, with, of course, Macron, Starmer and Merz sat in London and Trump in Washington, both pitching different things? And what are your thoughts about how this has developed for Western alliances?
Well, I think it's really a tragedy. After World War II, the United States was a leader in putting together a coalition built around the principles of the United Nations Charter of non-aggression, non-interference, non-resort to violence in order to complete territorial claims. And Trump's view is entirely different from that. Rather than having an overall strategy and the partners in Western Europe, he's looking at it as sort of a fortress America, that there can be the United States and the Western Hemisphere taking over Greenland, Canada, Panama, Venezuela, and then Russia can be its own center for reconstructing the old Russian Empire. This is very tragic If you look at how NATO has been able to be a defensive alliance, to keep the peace largely for over 80 years, and it is unclear now as to how this can be resolved, not just for a transaction in which President Trump claims victory and success, but for the stability to build peace and prosperity in the world for the longer term.
Yes, Raymond, do stay with us as we have further news coming out of the United States, of course, coming up next. Big news. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to meet US President Donald Trump on December the 29th to discuss the next steps in implementing the Gaza ceasefire, according to an Israeli government spokesperson. The talks are expected to focus on moving the fragile truce into its second phase. Netanyahu said that discussions with Trump would center on a US-backed plan aimed at ending the war in Gaza. Of course, a huge breakthrough there coming out of the Middle East. We now move on, and Paramount Skydance has launched a surprise hostile bid worth $108.4 billion for Warner Brothers Discovery, shaking up Hollywood's biggest media deal and challenging Netflix's earlier winning offer. The move comes just days after Netflix emerged as the preferred bidder in a weeks-long auction for Warner Brothers Discovery Studios, film libraries and streaming assets. Paramount's proposal values Warner Brothers Discovery at around $30 per share, and includes debt along with a potential breakup fee tied to Netflix's agreement. The bid aims to create a traditional media powerhouse capable of competing more directly with Netflix and big tech players that have expanded aggressively into entertainment. The offer is expected to face intense antitrust scrutiny, especially as US President Donald Trump has already flagged concerns over market concentration in the streaming industry. Lawmakers and Hollywood unions have also criticized the Netflix deal, warning of job losses and higher consumer prices. Warner Brothers Discovery has yet to respond publicly, but the late-stage bid injects new uncertainty into a deal that had seemed all but settled. Raymond Vickery joins us once again. Raymond, is this the end of entertainment as we know it?
Comment. I think that entertainment as we have known it is in transition. Is a huge sea change, if you will, in terms of technology. Rather than the old studio system with Warner Brothers, MGM, the traditional studios, it turned out movies which were seen in theaters, we now have a technological revolution in which people are streaming from home. There's a wide variety of product. And anytime there is transition in technology, there is a reordering of the economic basis for the industry, and that's what's going on here. Unfortunately, we've seen a greater and greater concentration brought about really by a hands-off approach to the antitrust laws. It's encouraging that President Trump is finally waking up to this, when in other areas such as AI, he has taken exactly the opposite approach, and that is that there shouldn't be any interference. And of course, underlying this all is the political questions of who controls media in the United States. There are those who are Trump supporters who want to inject their billions into the area for political purposes. So this is a very crucial time in the reordering and reinvention, really, of media in the United States. And it has vast international implications, it seems to me, because the soft power of the United States has been based in large part on what happens in Hollywood and what people see around the world. And so if you eliminate a large number of studios, you put it in the hands of one or a few companies, and then you overlay it with political considerations, the whole situation in regard to U.S. soft power is very much changed.
Okay, Raymond, do stay with us as we have further updates from the United States. But first, we have some breaking news coming in from the Indo-Pacific. And according to JMA APA reports, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake has struck the Asian nation of Japan. Tsunami warnings have also been issued. We are waiting for more details to be released on this by the ministry. Okay, we move back over to the United States, and China's trade surplus crossed the $1 trillion mark in just 11 months, even as exports to the United States plunged nearly 29%. This highlights a major shift in global trade patterns. Customs data showed China's exports grew 5.9% year on year in November, rebounding from an unexpected contraction in October and beating market expectations. Total exports reached $330.3 billion, driven by strong demand from Southeast Asia, Africa and Latin America, and also the European Union. Imports rose 1.9% to $218.6 billion, but weak domestic demand linked to a prolonged property downturn continues to weigh on consumption and investment. Despite a recent US-China trade truce and partial tariff rollbacks, economists say Chinese shipments to the United States have yet to recover meaningfully. Factory activity remained in contraction for an eighth consecutive month, raising questions about the durability of the rebound. Raymond, China's trade surplus here crossing $1 trillion in just 11 months. How big of a red flag is this for the global economy?
Well, I think it's very much a red flag and shows the weakness of the Trump administration transactional bilateral approach to international trade. Since World War II, we've had a WTO, before that the General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, in which you had a multilateral approach to try to build peace and prosperity through international trade, which would benefit nations across the board. What has happened here, of course, is that the basic problems of trade surpluses with China haven't been dealt with. The Trump administration has entered into some negotiations based upon fentanyl drug shipments to the United States, the precursors, and really hasn't taken into account what has to happen in the world overall in order to build peace and prosperity. The Trump administration got a year's forbearance in regard to the rare earths, which would have basically shut down a lot of the high-tech production. But overall, the problem hasn't been dealt with. And the Trump administration, from a U.S. point of view, seems to take the view that, well, it can be Fortress America economically, and we don't have to deal on a multilateral basis with the rest of the world. So I think these latest figures show the weakness in that approach, and we need to get back to what has served the interest of the United States and the world so very well since World War II, namely expanding the multilateral World Trade Organization, rule of law, principled approach to international trade, instead of just entering into real estate transactions to show that President Trump can come out on top.
Raymond, Vickery, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us here on the channel. We now move on, and the US Congress intends to revoke two laws from 1991 and 2002 that authorize the US president to conduct military operations in the Middle East. The move is included in the draft defense budget for the current fiscal year, which was agreed upon by Democrats and Republicans. According to the US Constitution, Congress, not the president, has the power to declare war, but in recent decades, US leaders have broadly interpreted the permissions granted to them to use military force abroad, including launching new operations. Representatives from both parties have now decided to repeal the two laws relied on when using force in the Middle East. A commission from both chambers coordinated the details of the differing proposals. The coordinated defense budget proposals are usually approved quickly. Matthew Vadum joins us now. He's an American journalist and author, and he joins us live from the American capital of Washington. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us to discuss this update. Congress here preparing to remove two laws from 1991 and 2002 for war authorizations. Why is this happening now in the year 2025?
Well, because some are uncomfortable in the Congress with the president having power to act without getting permission from Congress. In theory, according to the U.S. Constitution, as you noted earlier, the president does not have the power to declare war. That is a prerogative of Congress, and the president has authority, as commander-in-chief of the military, to take military steps, to defend the country or to do things to take urgent action to protect U.S. interests, but some want to take it back. They're not happy that President Trump has been, that the Defense Department under President Trump has been attacking alleged narco-trafficking boats off the coast of Venezuela, and they want the United States, they want the Congress, which has as I noted earlier, has the power to declare war, to have to be able to issue a resolution either authorizing that or repealing that. And I think right now the move by some in Congress, especially by the dissident Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, is to take away those powers.
But Matthew, why has the Middle East been singled out in particular? Of course, the United States has a long history of interfering there militarily, but of course the action, as you've mentioned, in the Caribbean is frequent as well. And so with these laws, these would specifically single out military action in the Middle East, congressional approval there. Why now, especially after the war in Gaza and that 12-day war in Israel seems to be scaling down?
There are a lot of Democrats who don't believe that Democrats in Congress who don't believe that the United States should be involved in any way in the conflict in between Israel and Gaza and between the Palestinians, and they fear that it could spill over into a greater conflict in the future. Even though right now, the direction that they're heading is towards a peaceful settlement, with some bumps along the way. And the Democrats aren't comfortable with President Trump involving the United States in those affairs, and there is a bloc within the Republican Party that is also that doesn't want the United States involved in Middle Eastern affairs and wants the president's wings clipped, so to speak.
Yes, Matthew Vadum, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on, and US President Donald Trump says he will sign an executive order this week to standardise how artificial intelligence projects are approved across the country. The move aims to prevent a patchwork of different state-level rules that the White House argues could slow innovation and weaken US leadership in artificial intelligence. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said there must be one rulebook for AI, warning that companies cannot be expected to seek approvals from all 50 states every time they develop or deploy new technology. He framed the order as essential for keeping the United States competitive in the fast-moving AI race. Supporters say a uniform federal framework would create clarity and speed up development, while critics may argue it could reduce states' ability to address local risks and ethical concerns surrounding AI. Details of how the executive order would reshape oversight and balance federal and state authority are expected later this week. Okay, that's all that we have time for this hour on America 360. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.